Excited. Hello, everyone, and welcome to Cult Musical Zone again. And today is a double feature, and we're talking about Michael Jackson's two criminally underrated cult musical masterpieces, Captain EO and Moonwalker. And today we have our two returning cult musical slash movie aficionados who are going to approach this and give me a history lesson and give me and impart MJ wisdom on me, a massive Michael Jackson fan. And we're going to approach this from a different angle since we're doing a double feature. So if you'd like to go around and just introduce yourself quickly, and then we can jump into these two cult masterpieces.
I'm Helena, and today I am channeling Kat's Grisabella realness because it is freaking cold out here in Portland. I'm a film historian kind of person. I really love film and I really love cult musicals, and that's my bag.
Would you please break into memory?
No, that's about all I can do.
I'm Paulie DeLarge. I am the producer for a Rocky Horror Picture Show shadowcast in New Jersey called The Ordinary Kids. I am also a union professional film and video editor. I have a little bit of a history in film preservation. So, yeah.
Now, Helena, our two returning guests, Renee and Janice, who are from Ordinary Kids, they were on the Howard the Duck episode, etc. They're part of Paulie's Ordinary Kids theater troupe, Rocky Horror Theater Troupe. So that's their connection. I think he's their troupe leader.
I'm one of them.
One of them.
It's two of us. It's just me and my wife, but yeah, we're the troop leaders, the mom and dad.
And I love what y'all do. In a week or so, I'm going to post y'all's Golden Girls Rocky Horror mashup, which I adore.
Thank you. That was a lot of fun.
Now, believe it or not, like unlike the other cult musicals we talk about, I don't know a lot about the history of these two movies. I wasn't present when these movies were released. I was born in 1990, not to date myself, but I've always been a Michael Jackson fan. But the only thing that I really know about the production of this movie comes from the biography by Randy Tamborelli, which I implore everyone to read. It's Michael Jackson's biography. I think it's called The Magic, the Madness, and the Mayhem, the complete life of Michael Jackson, etc. It's really good. So I don't know a lot about the making of. I don't know a lot what went into it. I don't really know the era of which all these two cult musicals spring. I've always been a massive Michael Jackson fan. He's always been a huge part of me. Ha! I didn't even mean to make that fun. Huh?
See what you did there.
I didn't mean to do that.
Yep.
But so I am really interested to hear y'all's take on, I guess, what was happening in that particular era, but also why these two musicals were so important. So to begin with, of course, Michael Jackson, he's, of course, the king of pop, and he was an incredible singer, songwriter, and an incredible artist in terms of dance. But one of the things, it's really sad, but one of his biggest unrealized dreams was to become a filmmaker. He had so many ideas. And when we talk about his music videos, all of his music videos are mini movies, etc. And I think these are the two biggest examples of Michael's work besides The Wiz and besides
Thriller.
Yeah. These are, I guess, his two only shots at making something and leaving a legacy of films. And it's really sad to think about what could have been his unrealized dreams of filmmaking, but we'll get into that later. But the first thing we're going to talk about, I mean, these two movies were released within a year. Captain EO and, of course, Moonwalker. But I guess we'll begin talking about Captain EO, which is the first cult musical we're going to talk about. Before we begin talking about the plot and the music and why it's so important, do you all remember when Captain EO was a thing?
Oh, yeah. Totally. From my own point of view, that was 86. So I think I was like 9 years old when that came out. And it was a splash because it came out at Disneyland. And so like then everybody wanted to go to Disneyland to go see the Captain EO Spectacular because it was kind of like when they released that latest Star Wars ride. Not that I'm a Star Wars person, but that was like the hype that it was. It was like it was a destination. Like you have to go to Disneyland. We had been to Disneyland in '83 when it was really lame. which actually, in hindsight, that was when it was like pure Disneyland before they started to adulterate it with, oh, they're going to put Pirates of the Caribbean and the pirate and the whatever. But so I saw Disneyland in its purest form in like 83, but this was like the first time when Disneyland started to adapt like commodities. This was the first big like commodity, was this Michael Jackson Captain EO show, and everybody had to go to Disneyland to see it.
Well, was it advertised in the papers or was it
Oh, it
advertised?
was known. It was like it was in the zeitgeist of everything. It's like everything was, oh my God, hot property, Michael Jackson, Captain Disneyland. It was went without saying.
Same thing, question posed to you, Polly. Do you remember it being in the public consciousness? Do you remember the hype surrounding
So
this?
I was born 85, so I missed out on that part. But Moonwalker, there is a lot of history with that. However, with that said, I did see when Captain EO was actually on broadcast when MTV showed it one time in 1996.
Mm-hmm.
Entire 18-minute, obviously 2D version of it. And it was really cool. At the time, again in 1996, I wasn't really into Michael Jackson, for a lot of reasons, but um, it was an interesting piece of media, and it was a music video, but it was an 18-minute music video. So it had, a paper thin plot, but it was so just visually like cool. And then finding out that this was a 4D experience, which then I got to experience actually finally in 2010 when I was in
Mm.
Disneyland, and they brought it back as a tribute. And it was the full, 4D experience that you were expecting with lasers, and they had like compression air that would shoot up at you at certain points during the chase through the machine planet. Um, but also seeing it presented in 70 millimeter in the amphitheater just was like, I could picture myself at the time. It would have been, yeah, like 20, maybe 20 years ago, that like, that was still going on. And it was just really cool. And knowing that the talent behind it, it was directed by Francis Ford Coppola, of all like of all
Mhm.
people, but George Lucas's influence obviously is a steward for it. The Disney Imagineers and their creation of it, and then reading all the talent behind it. Essentially, this was an independent feature done through Disney at a whopping $23 million in 1986 money. Um, and just again, the visuals of it, not to say far ahead of its time, it is absolutely cribbing on everything that's come before it in terms of like Star Wars or Dark Crystal, Labyrinth, but it was utilizing the tools to make something just cohesive. And we're talking about it today, so clearly it's got its merits and legs.
Well, I think you hit on something, Helena hit on something that I wanted to talk about because I mean, I'm always fascinated to hear about people who are, alive in decades of that I'm obsessed with. Or so this is pre Little Mermaid, and this is pre Who Framed Roger Rabbit, who basically brought Disney back from the brink of destruction. Both of those movies are credited with doing that. So, would you say that Disney in the '80s had become lame and dull to where it wasn't even it's sort of not in the same vein that Disney, is having to decline right now because that's a completely different reason. But would you all say like before this whole Captain EO extravaganza that the 80s Disney, 85, 86, or where Disney wasn't necessarily considered cool or popular anymore? So they tried whatever they could do to bring it back from the brink of
Mm.
collapse.
Well, I mean, you have to consider Disneyland was always like the thing that everyone aspired to go to. Like that was a rite of passage. You had to go to Disneyland. Uh, Disneyland was in popular culture completely separate from whatever they were outputting. Like you went to Disneyland to see Snow White, and then you went to Disneyland to see the classic Disney properties like Haunted Mansion and stuff like that. So their output filmically was a whole separate thing that was just kind of like failing and falling flat, unfortunately, because I think that's when they did some of their weirdest work. I mean, certainly their strangest work. You've got your Something Wicked This Way Comes, you've got your Return to Oz, all that kind of stuff. It's like they made great stuff, but you know, they needed a boost, and I don't think the boost came from this film necessarily, but the boost for Disneyland came from this because it was it was the first property that they really had to say, hey, we've got something new at Disneyland, you know?
Yeah. And I'm from the East Coast, so it would have been Disney World for our elk, but I guess it'd be both of them mirrored, I guess, the experience of Disney World and Disneyland were both you had to go there despite if Disney were pumping out even today it is despite if Disney's not putting out big hits,
Yeah.
people are still going to go to Disney World or Disneyland.
Have to go, yeah.
I think also too, because again, like it was mid 80s that like, I was born. So, but in reading and doing a lot of like, looking back at where the company was, I think the credit, even though I hate going to like executives save the company, Michael Eisner, who was the head of Paramount Pictures at the time, the guy that basically spearheaded the Indiana Jones films,
Mm-hmm.
became president of Disney Corporation and brought a lot of his team over to Disney to essentially reinvigorate the company. And one of the stories behind the development of Captain EO was that he was asking his teenage son,
Yeah.
why is Disney lame? Like, why are people not, or young people rather, not into the Disney sphere? And I guess his son was just very blunt with it in that it's for kids. Like you're making things for kids, and these things have not evolved with the times. We're talking early to mid 1980s when you have a teenage generation coming up with MTV, with cable TV. Um, the sensibilities have changed, and maybe Disney now needs to keep up with the times. Also, we are coming out of, again, George Lucas and Star Wars. Return of the Jedi was 83, so we're talking 84, 85 when this transition to the Michael Eisner era begins with Disney. And Disney, Helena made a great point about like they were putting weird stuff out, but it was coming out from like, you don't want to say journeyman directors, but you're not getting Francis Ford Coppola, George Lucas, Spielberg. You're not getting these names that are now part of the American conscious in terms of pop culture. So for them to get Michael Jackson, who at the time is the biggest star in the world,
A minute, yeah.
into a 4D ride experience, it just made sense. And by that meaning dollar signs, reinvigorating the park. And they sort of did a soft launch with that, with I believe in the like before Captain EO, I think they did like teenage dance nights or something like that, where they would have like popular music of the time to get teenagers to go to Disneyland and make it cool and make it fun and make it an experience that, kids that were born in like the late 60s, early 70s who are now of age could go to Disneyland and, hey, I'm having a good time. I'm going to go to Disneyland. So then getting Captain EO made just financially, I guess, made sense. And also was sort of like the catalyst of like the direction that Disney was going to go for at least the next like decade.
Yeah, and just on a side note, I've always thought that Michael Eisner saved Disney.
Oh, no, he
I,
did.
I think Michael Eisner, great if they could bring Michael Eisner back. I don't know if he'll ever go back, but I mean,
I think he's very much retired, but
he could literally save Disney again. But I digress. So yeah, there's a whole aspect because I was born in 90, so I was born after the Disney Renaissance. So where Disney had just catapulted into this new renaissance that everybody loved Disney again, Little Mermaid, Beauty and the Beast, Aladdin, etc. So I wasn't alive in a time where Disney was stagnant. I am now, but I digress.
It's different.
But,
It's different.
it's cyclical, sign of the times. They'll be back.
maybe. But
Yeah.
so another aspect, so you have that Disney, Michael Eisner whole different aspect of trying to bring, resurrect Disney. And I wasn't alive in that period. But for me to have like already be born with Michael Jackson being who he was, and I mean, I was born in the dangerous era slash the history era. So he was already part of the consciousness, for better or worse, in the American media and the American minds. But for Michael Jackson at this particular, because both of these movies are, we're talking about Michael. We're not only talking about these two movies, we're talking about the genius behind the films, Michael Jackson. How was, I know everybody will say the same thing, but for being American at that time, even you, Polly, you were born in 85, being American at that time, how big, in your own words, was Michael Jackson in terms of the American public consciousness? How big? How could you describe it? What could you compare it to today in terms of the massive amount of popularity that he had?
There is no comparison to the massive amount of popularity he had. I mean, the way I think about it, and I'm going to just say this up front, as an 8-year-old in 1985, I was incredibly cynical for some reason. I was a child, totally cynical child, Franz Kafka as a child, basically. But in that era, after Michael Jackson came out with Thriller, it was like an institution. It was like you had McDonald's and you had Michael Jackson and you had Disneyland. And it's like these were the institutional things of my youth, the things that were foundational. They just exist. And there's nothing, it's sort of like we're all under the aegis of all of these three things pretty much growing up in that era of the 80s. It was Michael Jackson, McDonald's, and Disneyland. Um,
Compare it to today, really.
there's no way to compare it to today. I mean, it was the biggest thing. And I'll say that, when after Thriller came out, it's like that's the state we were in. When we started to move into this era, when he started to kind of change how he looked,
Mhm.
it was almost as if he was kind of letting us down a little bit. Like I remember when Bad came out, and it was so shocking. His appearance changed so drastically when that came out, and it was kind of like, ah, what's happening? And he kind of got this like really weird kind of more effeminate look. Where I mean, he wasn't exactly like super hyper masculine before, but it was jarring. And to have him come back out with Bad with that look, and then like trying to be I'm bad, which I mean, we were all like, No, no. But he was, I mean, still king of pop. The song was super catchy. The song was a hit, and it's like, well, okay, Michael Jackson, we still like you, I think.
In terms of like, I think I saw a statistic. I don't remember what it was. It was a video watched. I think I couldn't. I think I don't want to misquote, but I think in terms of Thriller, more American households had it than they didn't have it. It was
Yeah,
like everybody appear. I don't know. It's so unusual to me because I was born so long after that.
Big
That
Mac and Thriller. I mean, shit. Yeah.
And
yeah, I mean,
Thriller changed the game too in terms of just like music videos
Oh yeah.
and how they're produced. I mean, it is a movie, it is a mini movie. And again, he had a Hollywood director, John Landis doing it, um, which that doesn't happen. So
Mm-mm.
for Michael Jackson to have that crossover into Hollywood, um, really just was like a game changer in terms of like who could do music videos and who could make music videos and elevate them to levels that are cinema. Um, it just was not done. So for that, to have happened and early in the 80s, I mean, it was 83 when Thriller came out, that this set the tone for every pop artist to like, if I'm going to make a music video, I want to have like the best of the best to do it.
Well,
So
and plus this became every time that he would do one of these videos, because they all sort of became these ultra long mini movies. It was like, oh, he's about to drop a video. It's an
yeah,
event.
it was a deal. I remember those. I remember when Scream in
Yeah.
91 or 92 came out, and like
Mhm.
there was a countdown
Mhm.
for that, and I remember that like
Yep. It's like you had to wait till after the sitcoms were over, and it was like, all right, everybody, okay, you're gonna get on the TV and watch,
yeah,
this
or
Michael
Black or
Jackson.
White. Black or White was like I think paired with like a Simpsons episode on a Sunday.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it was like stay tuned, and it might have
Yep.
actually been the Simpsons episode where he guest starred on it. So
Mm.
they
It's
full.
like the mom put down the dishes, wiped off her hands, and went out to the living room because it's time for the Michael Jackson video to debut.
it's just so hard for me to get my head around it because I was born when he was already a thing. So I'm trying to just
Oh, here's
and
the thing. Yeah.
with like the way that people are nowadays. I'm a massive Michael Jackson fan, but the way that people are nowadays, I think everybody is like a flash in a pan. And so I'm trying to understand really the consciousness in the minds of not even Americans, but the world in terms of him, like in terms of his impact and in terms of what he was doing. I mean, Prince, I guess, was massive, of course, of Purple Rain, but nowhere, would you say nowhere near the extent Michael was?
Well, Michael Jackson was ubiquitous. Like you could not escape Michael Jackson. Prince was just an artist and he would come out with an album and you'd be like, oh, it's a great album. But Michael Jackson was just,
Everything.
he
There
was
was
the
a
thing.
transcendence. Yeah, there was a transcendence to Michael Jackson. I mean, if like you made a comparison of like what the 80s were in terms of like public figures.
Mhm.
I mean, it to me, like you can encapsulate the 80s as Reagan and Michael Jackson. And I'm serious in terms of like the impact in terms of popular culture and culture in general of the United States.
Mhm.
And then leading out to the greater world where we're coming into like a post-Cold War, where Michael Jackson is touring in Russia and
Mhm.
the Eastern Bloc and like
Yeah.
the feel for Michael Jackson was bringing music as a peaceful
Mhm.
I guess a peaceful influence to like people to like
If anyone
embrace.
could do world peace, it was going to be
It's
Michael
Michael
Jackson.
Jackson. Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
Like no
So,
Uh,
artist today could do that.
oh, with
No
that said,
artist could
though,
say, oh,
oh,
sorry.
sorry. Uh,
I was gonna say no artist today could like, I am going to bring about world peace. I'm going to
yeah,
go to the Middle East and do a concert, and they're going to fall in line.
yeah.
That was how we could do Michael Jackson back in the
It was
day.
just a different thing, whether or not it was earnest that Michael Jackson truly believed like music has the healing ability to like
Mm.
break down walls, with a cliche like that. But yeah, and the thing is too, like Michael Jackson was around like from the Jackson 5. Like it's not like Michael Jackson appeared overnight. Michael Jackson, I don't want to say it was manufactured, but coming from like the Jackson 5 and then going on his own in the early 80s, there was already a public consciousness of like who this kid was and the man that eventually Jackson became. Um, Whereas like an artist like Prince developed and
Mhm.
created his own discography is not to say that Michael Jackson didn't, but like Michael Jackson, you could break the career down into like literally like half, like the Jackson 5 era to the solo era.
Mhm.
So people knew who Michael Jackson was. It's just in the 80s, Michael Jackson became Michael Jackson. He
You
wasn't
could
really Michael.
almost, you really could say that he belonged to all of us.
Yes,
oh,
no.
Whereas
He,
Prince, well, but I mean in a weird way, in a really strange way. Whereas Prince was just an artist, it's like Michael Jackson was just ours.
yeah.
And we
I
were,
love
America grew up with Michael Jackson. And
yeah.
that's why at the time of Michael Jackson's passing, it
Mhm.
was a very heavy hit to the public, consciousness, regardless of the controversies and everything like that. It was, we watched this boy
Mhm.
become literally the king of pop and one of the greatest media influencers in modern history.
so for him to be such, I guess you, like you, Helena, you said to belong to all of us and be bigger than life. I mean, be bigger than the Beatles. For it to be announced that he's going to be doing a ride at Disney World, what in Disneyland, what kind of impact would that have on ticket sales and excitement and people's interest in Disney? That's what another thing I'm interested in is
Oh,
announce the biggest star in the universe is going to team up with,
mhm.
what would
Yeah.
that do to
Yeah, that's like I said, it's like that became the thing, like you bragged about at school, you know. It's like, oh, I'm gonna go to Disneyland, I'm gonna see Captain Neo, you know, like, okay, rich folks, you know. It was a
and,
big
and
deal.
and there's a lot of people a lot of critics that, and a lot of people even on the internet that just consider this to be some manufactured product with no merit or worth whatsoever. That's loosely tied together with special effects and costumes. But despite it being a ride and despite its groundbreaking, I guess, groundbreaking legacy as one of the first four. I don't know if it was the first 4D, but maybe one of the first 4D rides.
Yeah, it might be the first. Memory serves, I think.
Definitely foundational to those kind of rides, which I can't deal with those kind of rides that make me throw up. But,
I think Star Tours was in development at the same time, and there's a
Mhm.
story behind also Star Tours and Captain EO.
Mhm.
You want to touch upon that too, but yeah, I think it was one of the first like immersive 4D films.
Yeah, I watched the Defuncto Land thing a couple of times, and I mean, I remember Star Tours, and it was weird. I remember you
Yeah,
sat in my car. I remember that. I remember seeing Cats and EO when I was like 5 or 6 at Disney World, one of my first times at Disney World. But despite it being a ride, despite it being just a groundbreaking ride and its reception and its premiere and all of that, looking at it as a musical, and we'll pretend it's not 18 minutes long, looking at it as a piece of art and as a musical and as a Michael Jackson musical, what do you think of it as a musical?
it's not terribly a musical, I think. I mean, there's a musical number in it,
yeah.
but like I say, just all of the tropes of the 80s that tag along with Michael Jackson. You've got the cute fuzzy sidekicks that are
Mhm.
wacky. You have fart jokes, you have space shit. I mean, it was just everything of that time, and then you just put Michael Jackson on it, and it's just like a big souffle of the 80s.
It is. No, it is. It totally is. And for good reason. The people behind it, like, because originally, um, this was supposed to be a Peter Pan inspired.
Mhm.
Um,
Surprise, surprise.
yes. So,
Yeah.
Rick Rothschild, who was the Disney Imagineer that was assigned the project, who was to work with George Lucas, because Michael Jackson was like, all right, I will do this, but you gotta give me either George Lucas or Steven Spielberg. And they got George Lucas because Lucas was in development of Star Tours. So right there was like, all right, you're gonna have the guy behind Star Wars and Indiana Jones to steward this. I think it was Lucas though that was the one that got Coppola involved only because of their history together. Originally, John Landis was going to be approached to direct it. Because
Another thing is for the 80s and 80s children, did George Lucas have in your mind in the American consciousness, did he have the same, if a movie is like, oh, produced or directed by George Lucas, did that have a role
yeah,
as like starring Michael Jackson?
yeah, it
Yeah.
was.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Lucas and
George,
Spielberg. We talked about Spielberg on the Roger Rabbit thing and the influence of that. It was like
yeah,
you're
this
done
was
deal.
80s Amblin,
Mm,
80s Lucasfilm. These were the forefront of visual media. Like
yeah.
Lucas basically had monopoly on special effects with
Mm,
Industrial Light and Magic. And this is when they were using models and stop motion and all the tools of the trade at the time to
mhm,
create, immersive worlds, from the Star Wars films to, Indiana Jones and everything else that they could get their hands on. Any
mm.
special effects film that was a big tentpole film in the 1980s, Lucas was involved in, whether direct or not. He was the guy that you would go to.
Like
Uh,
Labyrinth, Howard the Duck.
like Labyrinth, like Dark Crystal, like everything. It was all these guys worked together because they knew like how they would, how the pipelines were, and also they were going to make.
Think that
Uh,
yeah, do you think Captain EO is too Star Wars? Because there's a
Oh,
lot
it wears it on its sleeve. It wears it on its sleeve
yeah,
completely,
it's
but it's okay though. Like
yeah.
for what it was designed to be, it became Captain EO simply because like the fantasy element of a Peter Pan story was more designed for if it was going to be in the
fantasy.
fantasy part of Disney, and they already had a commitment to Tomorrowland. So they had to essentially rewrite the
Mhm.
concept for approval by Michael Jackson to do it, and it had to be now a sci-fi inspired project.
And it's
Um,
beautiful. I think it's a beautiful story. I mean, the whole point is, going to these dark places and delivering light. And that light is the gift of music. And music has, I mean, the whole song, We Are Here to Change the World, is about, changing the world through the power of music and through the power of light. Because, Captain Io, Eos, the goddess of dawn, or the goddess of dawn, the great goddess of dawn. So, like, I think there's that whole aspect. Maybe not maybe, I'm very biased to Michael Jackson. So there's anything that he can do, I'm like, oh, we are the world. But
Mm,
like this whole
oh,
particular
God.
can do.
Mm,
and that was actually a
I'm
Francis Ford
sorry.
Coppola thing. Francis Ford Coppola was the one that named the Captain EO. It had no title.
Mm,
He was the one that was like, no, you're Captain EO. This is coming from exactly that. Eos, the goddess of the dawn, bringing
mhm.
light to this machine shadow planet.
Yeah.
And that's
And
the thing about I was going to say, that's the thing about the 80s that I was at the time, even as a small child, I was very cynical about because it seemed like a lot of this stuff was really performative. Like we had the We Are the World, and we're all going to get together and sing, and it's going to make the world better. And I was, even as a kid, I'm like, is it though? Or is this just an excuse to get kind of a big circle jerk of all these people? But I'm just saying. I'm
well,
just saying that was literally I mean, I didn't have those words as a child, but that was how I felt about it. And that's how I felt about a lot of these things where it's like, oh, we're gonna make the world better. And it's like, no, the world is kind of shitty.
even whole feed the
Oh,
world.
Oh,
totally.
that was
Just
just the weirdest Christmas song. Like,
performative nonsense, yeah.
But the whole plot of this, space captain. And we
Mhm.
really don't understand why he's going to this planet. He just wants to deliver the supreme leader a gift, which apparently, reading trivia, it was supposed to be Shelley Duvall, but she didn't like the makeup. She was having some sort of reaction to it. And so,
Oh,
yeah. Oh my God, I had to tell you this. I read this yesterday at work and I was like, oh my God, I'm going to cry. But then again, I'm biased to Michael Jackson. So before they got Angelica Houston, I promise you, I don't know where I found this, but I'll send it to you. She had a dream before they approached her that she was suspended in space. Michael Jackson was suspended in space. They were lovers in the desert in space, and they were brought flowers or something by elephants. And then they called her and offered her the movie. That's what she said. Oh, wait, no, that's what she
wild.
said.
I love Angelica Houston.
I
God,
love that too.
such an incredible actress. But yeah,
Are
I mean,
you
I, I
finding
knew
out?
about I knew about Shelley Duvall, and that would have been an interesting take, though. Thinking about it,
Could she have
because
been properly evil, do you think?
what's that?
Could she have been properly evil, do you think?
You know what?
I don't
If
think
she's a
so.
great actress, I mean, like in terms of like the output that she was doing in the 70s and the 80s, I would have loved to have seen like an alternate reality version of this with Shelley Duvall playing like this biomechanical
Mhm.
monster. Like, and I think she could have pulled it off. But yeah, like it was the whole makeup thing that,
Sure.
unfortunately, it just wasn't
I
going to
felt
work
that.
out.
And Angelica Houston, okay, I don't know if anybody's ever noticed this, but there is a line that Angelica Houston, Supreme Leader, says to Captain EO that has to be inspired by, lifted from, etc., from legend. So, do you remember when Tom Cruise's Jack character is in the swamp and Meg Mucklebones? He's trying to. Have y'all seen Legend? What is it? Ridley Scott? Is his name Ridley
Yes,
Scott?
Yeah.
Ridley Scott.
Yeah, and he's trying to like not get eaten by this swamp witch, and he goes, surely a creature as beautiful as you wouldn't want to eat a scrawny boy like me. And she goes, you find me beautiful?
Yeah.
Mhm.
And this, the Supreme Leader goes, you find me fair. No, she goes, you find me fair in legend. And then she goes, you find me beautiful. I've always wondered if that's like inspired or that just happens to be a trope.
It's a
And
trope.
Trope, yeah. Coming from
always
fan.
It's buttering up the evil villain, yeah.
we all like to be complimented.
Yes, we
So
do.
it's that, and of course, Michael Jackson does a very whiz-inspired brand new day dance with "We Are Here to Change the World," which he didn't write, and it still hasn't been released except on a bot set. You can't even stream it, which is such a huge, huge just loss to music fans and Michael Jackson fans, and then you end the entire film with Another Part of Me, which was on the Bad album and was in Moonwalker in the trailer. So with those two songs and the whole plot of this musical, and with the creative forces of George Lucas and Francis Ford Coppola, which apparently Coppola only took this movie because he was going to go bankrupt.
Yes,
I believe
he
it.
was financially depleted in the 80s. He had a lot of
He
bad
did, yeah, he did
choices.
that musical, that very strange musical called One from the Heart, which is the Las Vegas musical that's completely shot inside. They don't film it in Las Vegas. They film Vegas inside a studio
Yeah.
with
And
Dan and Raul Julia and a couple others. But this, with all the ingredients that it is, you have the Disney magic. Do you think, besides it being a ride, do you think it works as a short musical film?
I think it does. It has its merits. It's not I think the groundbreaking aspect is that like it was marketed as a ride or not a ride, but like an experience. As a film, though, visually, like it's got a lot going on. It is kind of copying everything that is popular at the time. I mean, even the look of the Supreme Leader is inspired by like H.R. Giger's Alien, design with the biomechanic look to, how the leader is, and even like the machine planet and all that. But taken for what it is, it's an entertaining 18 minutes. Michael Jackson's not exactly giving the strongest performance that you would expect, for a captain of a interstellar crew. And that was kind of one of the big fears of the Disney executives when they saw the rushes, that like you could barely hear Michael Jackson's dialogue, like he's so soft spoken. But it's it's a G-rated Guardians of the Galaxy. Like at the time, it really kind of has um that feel of an Amblin George Lucas film, obviously, but it's entertaining, and I think for what it was at the time, um, something that you could feel that it belongs in the greater Jackson catalog. It does have its place there,
And I'll rephrase
especially.
the question for Helena. Do you think, besides it being a ride, if they have all these powerhouses together, these media and creative powerhouses, and you have the music, etc., you've got Jackson, you've got Disney, do you think it could have been a full-length musical film?
Oh, totally. I
And
mean,
you think it would have been a success?
I wouldn't, I mean, I don't think it would have been a success. It's obviously set up like, oh, we're on a ride and oh, we got to navigate to the planet. And I mean, that whole sequence kind of kills it as a narrative thing because it's like, they're obviously like supposed to be other things going on. Like you're supposed to be in a chair that's rocking around and it's like, you're on this ride. So, I mean, I think that after you get through this sort of stupid chase sequence, I think it's better, but it's still goofy as hell, honestly. I mean, the whole thing, like, so he has magic powers. I rewatched it this morning, and I'm like, wait, so he can shoot hand lasers, hand energy? Like, I would like to have more backstory on like, oh, he's a mage from the planet of blah, So it just doesn't make a lot. It doesn't make a lot of sense. It's set in space. We suspend our disbelief because okay, it's a space. We're in space, and he has space powers.
It probably made more sense when it was developed as a Peter Pan style story where
I'm
it's supposed to
sure.
be fantasy, and I think it
Yeah.
was like going after pirates. That probably made more sense in terms of like it being more of a well, not fantasy as opposed to space fantasy, where
Mm.
have technology and you would presume like, is it the costume that he wears? Is it some sort of energy that's coming from it, or is like you said, a
Yeah,
space age? It's not made clear, and I for
he's got the force.
yeah.
Now, I watch it twice a year. I love Captain EO. Some wonderful Michael Jackson fan scanned it somehow and put it on YouTube. It's never been released on Disney Plus. It's only been aired one time. Michael Jackson tribute closed all Disney parks in 2015 to make way for other things. Would you like, I mean, regardless of your thoughts about MJ or your thoughts about Captain EO, do you think it's a disservice that it's not on Disney Plus, that it's not been on Blu-ray as a special feature, that it hasn't been screened? Do you think it's a disservice that it's just gone?
It should be on a Blu-ray. It should be a special thing, I think. Absolutely.
I think it's a question of like who, I mean, technically Disney owns it, but like, does the Jackson estate have any kind of copyright on it? I mean, that's probably where what the holdup is. I believe also Disney does not even have the Simpsons episode with Jackson on it. Um, I don't know if it's because of the controversies that, obviously came after, whether or not it's a copyright thing, but it seems like Disney is sort of like scrubbed any sort of association with Jackson or the Jackson state. And that's a shame. It should be preserved, whether on physical media or on streaming. It does deserve to be seen. It is a piece
Even
of
on
Disney.
Disney Plus under their shorts collection.
Yeah, it should be. It should be there.
There's no reason it shouldn't be.
But even though like the Jackson State, like, are they playing hardball? Is there a reason why it's not being shown? Like what prevents them from, I guess, either releasing it on a anthology, disc or something. But who knows? It's probably at this point just a corporate thing, which is a shame.
Oh, we can't hear you, James. You're muted.
Oh, sorry. I said it's a shame because so many great things that we love get caught up in limbo because of rights. Rights are so complicated. For instance, certain things are available, and we'll get into Moonwalker. Moonwalker's available over here in the UK, not available in the USA. I mean, there's so many just different. I mean, there is, in my opinion, and we'll get to the legacy, there is a desire for it with the Michael Jackson community. There is a desire for it possibly with the George Lucas. And I don't know, is there a Francis Ford Coppola community? Do you think there's a Coppola community?
This is external. This is not, I wouldn't even think of this
Gotta
as
be a
a Coppola
cinephile
project.
for that. Oh,
I mean, Godfather and this, not
yeah.
the two great tastes that taste weird together.
The Coppola cinematic universe.
Mhm.
Where this together. So
Godfather takes place thousands of years before Captain EO, but it's all connected.
Yeah.
I love Captain EO, and I think about Captain EO all the time. I look at like merch that people have put on eBay and Redbubble, and I like to think that that Captain EO is just another musical movie, a short musical movie, a la Ghost and a la Thriller that Michael Jackson did. So of course, after Captain EO, Michael Jackson did bad. And I do have a question for those who were around that particular time. So with all the hype from Thriller, I mean, Thriller still what is still the biggest selling album of all time. With Bad coming out, which Moonwalker was, I guess, created to promote Bad and sort of be in correlation and conjunction with Bad, the Bad album. With Thriller and being as big as it was, and Michael Jackson being as big as it was, do you remember the hype for Bad for those that were there in that time?
Yep. Again, it was another event, like the video is going to drop at this time, be there, or, we're going to show it 5 times in a row, but, this is when you start watching Bad now. And that's the cultural understanding. So there was a time and place.
Yeah, I was 2 or 3, but I remember vividly the music video, and my mom saw the reaction that I had to Bad. I was dancing as a clumsy toddler to it, but Bad is actually the first album that I was ever gifted.
Oh,
I still have it. And all I knew was like, as an impressionable child, like, this is so much fun and so cool. I didn't know, like, to me, I thought almost like Michael Jackson was like my friend, or like a family friend or a family member. It was the weirdest thing, like the reaction that like I took to seeing Bad for the first time, and that will lead into Moonwalker. And my experience with it, like, it just was.
So I was a late bloomer to both Captain EO and Moonwalker. They were not on my radar whatsoever. I didn't see Captain EO until 2012. and I didn't see Moonwalker probably till 2014. I've always loved Michael Jackson, but they weren't on my radar. So that's why I was really interested to talk to you too, because actually Moonwalker flew under my radar for so many years. I knew of it, but I just thought it was like a collection of music videos. I didn't realize there was supposed to be a narrative and it was supposed to be some sort of artistic project for Michael Jackson. Do you remember when Moonwalker was in production and the hype, if there was any around Moonwalker?
Well, there was hype around it, but it didn't get a theatrical release, of course, in the US. And so it was just, you saw the poster in the video store and you're like, I might watch that. But there was other things you wanted to watch more. So I think for me, it definitely was like, oh, it's that new Michael Jackson thing, but it wasn't like it didn't, if it had aired on TV, we all would have like made a time to watch it. But the fact that it was just at the video store was like, okay.
I remember seeing that poster in our video store. That's how I learned about this as a movie. And this was at the time when you didn't have Blockbuster videos or large chains. Like we had a small little video store and you had to have membership to rent the videos. And they also took suggestions to get the videos. They had the poster, they didn't have Moonwalker. So my mom requested that they get a copy of Moonwalker so I could watch it. And
Oh,
a couple of days they got,
Awesome.
Moonwalker, and I wore that tape down. We eventually bought the tape from them, and I think the tape was like, I think at the time maybe like $40 for VHS.
Oh yeah,
And
that's
God.
we're
more
like
than
probably $80.
yeah, yeah.
That's
They
an investment.
because I
For a
basically just bought the tape by
set.
watching it so many times, it
Mm.
depreciated completely.
Well,
I had that on like 24/7 in my house.
well,
I
James, totally. Sorry. For James, back in the day before we had, the way that we buy physical media now, you didn't buy videotapes. You did not buy videotapes. The way that videotape companies made money was by selling the videotapes to the stores to be rented. So producing a videotape, those tapes would be $80 to $100 each because they were not for public consumption. You would only sell, a much smaller range of copies to video stores. So
and that's how
you made fewer and they were much more expensive.
and
And
that's
they
how
cut
basically they made their
they
profit back for Moonwalker in the
oh,
States.
so they took a cut of renting.
Well, no, because the tapes were expensive. You would sell the expensive tapes and that's how you would make your money.
So there was two ways to really make, because I know that, like you said, it wasn't released in America. It was released over in Europe, where it was a big it was a big success. But in the movie, I remember seeing the chart. It sold. I don't know if that includes renting, etc. Like 800,000 videotapes in like the very first, and
Mhm.
Betamax thing, which I don't really understand what Betamax is. Is it kind of
Tape
is it
format. So the superior tape format they never took off.
Exactly.
was it big? Was it
Oh, no,
smaller?
it's small. They
So
were
you had
small.
VHS, you had for your basic people, you had VHS. For the people who were slightly more nerdy, you had Betamax, which was a slightly better format. It definitely sounded better. The sound quality was a lot better. And then for the high-end cinema snobs, you had Laserdisc.
Yeah. Had never, and I wanted to tell y'all this. I was itching to tell y'all this. I was looking, my coworker looked, because I was doing research yesterday. She's like, "What are you looking at?" I was looking at comparisons between a VHS, a Laserdisc, a DVD, and a Blu-ray, and just to see like even the
Mhm.
different quality from a VHS to a Laserdisc was quite significant. But they're
Yes.
this big. They were like this big.
The record.
The,
It's the size of a 12-inch record.
And it was like I saw a promo ad for the Little Mermaid on Laserdisc. It was like only $89.95. Justification that who could afford that, you know?
Snobby rich folks, yeah.
And I promise you, we'll get back to this. I had the only mention and the only in my consciousness, the Laserdisc. There's an episode of Full House when the Tanners had this really snooty, they're babysitting this really snooty rich girl, and she says, "Well, do you have a Laserdisc player?" And Michelle Tanner's like, "No, we have a video cassette player," or something like that. But that's the only thing I know about Laserdisc.
Mhm.
So this was released on VHS, as Polly alluded to, and it was a massive success. So, in terms of massive success, is that in terms of people buying it, or people renting it, or a combination of both?
Both probably. I imagine it came out as the expensive release first, and then it was later probably done as a more public release.
And
So because
yeah,
of the whole distribution of it, you know, in terms of like how it was not going to get a theatrical distribution deal, that they had to pivot in order to get it onto, you know, onto VHS and get it out to try to recoup some, you know, because I think
Mhm.
Jackson's estate wanted like between like $5 to $10 million just for the distribution deal. And like the studios were just like, that's not happening,
and that's why
which is shocking.
he produced it himself. It was like
Yeah, he
15
put
minutes.
his own money into it, but like you need a studio to distribute the film, and he wanted at least like $5 to $10 million up front for a studio to purchase Moonwalker and then to put it into the theatrical run. So
Say
the thing with like territories too, in like terms of like the European territories, probably had a lower overhead cost to get into theaters because there's less theaters in Europe.
Mhm.
I mean, say what you want about him. He was a very savvy businessman in
Oh yeah.
terms in certain things that he did in terms of producing things. But I think that came and bit him in the ass eventually down the road. But when you finally got a chance to see it later or when it came out, what was your reaction or your I guess your just reaction to Moonwalker? What did you think of it? Were you like meh? Or were you like, oh my God? I'm sure you might have two different conflicting opinions, but
I actually didn't see the entire thing until yesterday. I mean, I definitely saw, but because Moonwalker is a collection of the video, so obviously I saw the bad video. I saw,
Smooth
Smooth
Criminal.
Criminal. I saw all the things. I saw parts of the Speed Demon in the background here. Um, but I had not seen it in that sort of anthology collection thing, which I thought was really interesting.
Did you think it was a weird premise to do like an anthology? Because Michael Jackson wrote this all himself. Do you think that was a weird sort of approach to do a movie, or do you think it just worked? I don't know.
There was no good way to put it together. I don't think there was any great way to string this all together because the things are kind of disparate, but it's fine. It's fine. I love an anthology. Um,
Joe Pesci in the middle of it all.
that just a weird choice. I mean, if it had just been like a thing of like I'm going to show your videos, I think that would have been fine. I don't think he needed to tie it together, but bless him for doing that.
I mean, were there any other anthology movies like that had come out around the time? I'm trying to think. What's the Talking Heads movie?
Oh, stop making sense.
That makes
Stop
sense.
making sense.
Wasn't that a concert movie?
More of a concept
Yeah,
documentary. It's not really an anthology
Yeah.
like this. And I think, unfortunately, we retroactively call it an anthology because that's how they tried to market it. It's
Yeah.
the story behind the making of this. Um, I think it was a lot of conflicting ideas that Michael Jackson was having in
Hmm.
development of the Bad album because this was both made in tandem. That it was kind of the case of like Michael Jackson wants to do this, so we're gonna, make it. Who cares? It doesn't have to make sense. We're just gonna fucking make it.
Right.
Apologies for the language.
oh,
Sorry.
you're fine.
Oh, okay, I
Graffiti
didn't
Bridge.
know.
Yeah. He graffiti bridged it. Hmm.
I would even say like Graffiti Bridge. At least Graffiti Bridge is like a coherent
Yeah.
plot. This is like just pure Michael Jackson's imagination.
Hmm.
And
Hmm.
for me as a kid,
Yep.
um, this was like my first taste of like pop media that I was just blown away by. I mean, my favorite film of all time is The Wizard of Oz. And again,
Mhm.
that was a videotape that like I wore down to like they basically just being like ribbon.
Right.
And we had like 3 VHS tapes of it because I just destroyed them because I was obsessed. And then this came, and then this became my new obsession. Um, so seeing it was like it didn't bother me that like it wasn't a coherent story. Like I was maybe 4 or 5, and it wasn't really a thing that like I don't care about a plot. I'm seeing visually interesting stuff. Um, And my mom was a big music and our apartment had like albums everywhere. So she introduced me to Jackson 5 Michael Jackson when Moonwalker came out also, because she was like, and maybe this is the reason why I thought like we were somehow related, or he was a friend of
Oh,
yeah,
Mhm.
like when you're little and you don't really have like an idea of like the greater world, like you sort of internalize things. So part where of the film with the retrospective of like seeing boy Michael Jackson become Michael Jackson, I related it to it somehow in some way that like it made me like wish like I want to be like Michael Jackson when I grow up. I want to sing and dance. I want to go into media. I want to do this. And so even like that part for like a kid, like young kid like myself, that stuck with me. And then the music video sections of like Batter with like again kids like a little older than I am doing like Bad was just like what is going on here? And then moving on to like Speed Demon, especially like Speed Demon with the claymation and like that was like again like I'm getting visually stimulated and the music is so cool and Michael Jackson's so cool. And then you get to Smooth Criminal.
mm.
That is just like, what am I watching now? This is a movie? It's becoming a movie now? And yeah, like it just blew my mind that like something like this was made. So
Mhm.
revisiting it like today, like it just was, I have a lot of thoughts about it now, going on at the tail end of my 30s. So
Well, critics, I don't care what critics say. They just considered it music video strung together by a loosely thin plot. But the music videos themselves, Leave Me Alone,
yeah.
Smooth Criminal, Speed Demon, etc., come together, of course, which probably, grinded Paul McCartney's gears. But what can
Oh,
you
that
do?
was probably so intentional. Like that's
I'm
just
sure.
Eddie. I
Mhm.
own your music.
And Sean Lennon's in it. John Lennon's son's in it.
Yeah,
Mhm.
yeah.
Sean Lennon. So those separate music videos, and I know Helena, I'm really dying to hear because I didn't even know that there's a connection between Portland and Speed Demon, which is so weird because this is all filmed in LA,
Mhm.
except that I'm really interested to hear that connection to Portland. But
Yep.
this, before we get into that, do you think each music video works? Do you think it's a beautiful little mini movie within a big anthology movie?
I think the music videos were done impeccably, honestly. I mean, obviously Michael had the money and the clout to get the best people to do the best job for every single thing that he did. Does it always make sense? Because I mean, it's again, it goes back to that graffiti bridge thing. It's like you have that one ego that wants to make a thing, but he's got the money and the clout to make it really, really well. So does it make sense? Eh. But does it look amazing? Is it impeccably produced? Yes, absolutely. And so and that always works. And that's why that was destination stuff for everybody at the time when those things would come out.
Smooth Criminal, which a lot of people don't even realize that timeless music video is from the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And what a weird movie it is.
Yeah.
You have the kids and
Oh.
Michael being like the Pied Piper, and then you've got Joe Pesci with his man bun and his like
Mhm.
and sunglasses and his
Mhm.
weird. I mean, was this? I don't. What had Joe Pesci done that was massive before or after this? And what was it? My cousin Benny. This is before or after my.
That was before.
Before. Yeah, this is before he kind of
Raging
got
Bull.
big with all the gangster movies.
Yeah. This is before Goodfellas. I think Raging Bull was probably like his biggest film.
Probably, yeah.
Smooth Criminal, of course, is an amazing, probably I think Michael Jackson's best music video. The way that it is, the way that it's shot is incredible. I really like Leave Me Alone because there's so many. If you look at the music video and the way that it was all conscious by Jackson. You've got the Elephant Man, you've got the Charlie Chaplin. So the whole song and the music video is telling the media to leave him alone. You know,
Mhm. But he was
I'm
doing
not.
weird shit. It's like, why? If you wanted to leave you alone, stop doing weird shit, dude.
There's
That
a
was
lot
how.
of conflicting, yeah, like looking back at it now, there's like a lot of like weird, like
There was weird shit.
you sort of see a destination where Michael is going, unfortunately, and it's not the best
Yeah, and
destination.
it's not a good destination.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well,
Yeah.
I think Randy Tamborelli, who knew Michael Jackson but was separate from him, said regarding this movie and regarding especially Leave Me Alone, you know, Michael had a very childlike mentality in terms of like, I'm a kid, leave me alone. I want to do what I want. And if you make fun of me, I'm gonna like stomp my feet and huff and puff. And I think that's what Leave Me Alone's about, because the whole Elephant Man, because Michael Jackson was obsessed with the Elephant Man. He was.
Mhm.
He
And
was. He
Elizabeth Taylor and Bubbles.
Bubbles, good old. I think there's a dig at Prince. Do you know the dig at Prince in this movie when
Mhm.
Bubbles,
Yeah,
they're asking where Bubbles is, and he's like,
Bubbles wearing a Prince t-shirt.
and he's wearing a Rain t-shirt, a Prince t-shirt, and they're like,
Mhm.
Prince, but leave me alone. And you've got pictures of Elizabeth Taylor in there because Elizabeth Taylor's Michael's basically muse and best friend. So I think
Mhm.
it's done, and even critics, even though they hated that song because they were like, you're doing this yourself, you're giving us material to make fun of you on, they still lauded that music video because of the way that it was done. And apparently it was an extremely hard thing to shoot because
Yeah.
it's not claymation.
It's
That's
like a
not
collage. It's like
Yeah.
a moving collage. I mean, that's you couldn't do any of that digitally. That all had to be done. You're making individual collage pieces move. I mean, it's beautifully done. It's very Pee-wee's Playhouse.
Yeah.
That was the very style of that time was that, and then you get into the Peter Gabriel videos that sort of do that same kind of stuff. So that was very trendy at the time.
and it's a shame that we don't really know about who worked on the movie in terms of who did all this collage and who did all this claymation and things like that, because it
Oh,
was
we know who it is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's a studio. I mean, there was a studio behind each of these videos, and there was a studio that did this particular kind of
I
animation.
mean, specifically for like Speed Demon, that's doesn't I have his name like right here?
Will Vinton.
Will Vincent,
I
yeah.
can talk all about Will
Guy that
Vinton
did
all
like
day. He's
yeah,
from here.
claymation.
and
Yeah,
Yeah.
we're about to
claymation
get to
became a thing because of Will Vinton. I mean, everyone knew it was stop motion, but the visual look of this,
Mhm.
the California raisins, the Noid, we're
Mhm.
going back. Oh, you don't know who the Noid is? That's right.
Avoid the
Um,
noise.
so
I
the
can.
Noid was a marketing tool by Domino's Pizza back in the 80s. And it's like this most annoying elf-like weird
He had like a bunny costume. It was like a
bunny
red bunny suit with bunny ears,
with like an N on his chest, and he would like deliver your pizzas, and it
what
was
was
just
and it
the
was called the Noid. Like
Noid.
the
you're annoyed.
Yeah.
oh
And
Avoid the Noid was the
and
slogan.
he's in Speed Demon. It's like
Yeah.
this the distillation of like
Mhm.
every 80s thing that like was popular at the time, Michael Jackson took and used it in
Yeah.
this film. I mean, you have like claymation cameos, specifically talking about Speed Demon, of Sylvester Stallone, of
Mhm.
Steven Spielberg, of Pee Wee Herman, like anybody that was in the pop culture sphere of late 1980s America was somehow satirized in that music video and
so of course.
utilizing like the look of something that is popular in commercials and then putting it to commercial music.
So besides the other music videos being filmed in LA, Helena, what do you know about the whole history, and not even history, but why Speed Demon was shot in Portland? What the whole connection is with Portland and the claymation? Because I don't know anything about it.
Oh, well, Will Vinton, who designed the California raisins, and he also did all kinds of other effects for Hollywood. Basically, lots of claymation. He did the Rock King in Return to Oz. I forget what you call
Oh, the
that guy.
Gnome King.
The Gnome King. So he did the Gnome King. He did tons and tons and tons of clay sort of animation like that. He did, of course, the California raisins, which was huge. Again, I was going to go back and say in the 80s, it's not like now where you have all of these creators and there's a plethora. There's just this smorgasbord of creators and creative output. It's like back then, the things that you saw in popular media, they fell into very small buckets because you only had this small number of creators putting things in the public consciousness. And Will Vinton at the time was one of these creators. And so his animations were everywhere in the 80s. Like you had advertising characters like the Raisins, and the Raisins had like a Christmas special. They would have their own like TV specials, and it made no sense because it's just marketing for freaking raisins. But for whatever reason, people wanted to see that as a property, so that's why we got specials and things. But the studios were here in Portland. and I could take you right to where they were. And so, but they made all the things here. And so basically, when they needed a place for Spike the Rabbit to drive his motorcycle around on, they're like, well, we got freeways. So behind me, Fremont Bridge. I mean, I was watching this and I was like, oh, it's Portland in the 80s. And I was like, oh, the Galleria, that's not there anymore. And it was just really cute. And I'm like, oh, it's the Max, the train system we have here, the like kind of above ground subway. It's like, oh, look, it was brand new. How cute, how sweet, you know. So they just took what we have. I mean, we don't have a lot of freeways here. So he's just basically doing a loop and he's going through downtown Portland. And I'm like, oh, Dan and Lewis Oyster Bar. And it's like,
So this guy, what was his, what you said, Will Vinton?
Will Vinton.
So he was basically on the radar of a lot of filmmakers in the consciousness of.
Marketing and yeah.
Yep. But he just had his studio here. He had that much clout. He didn't have to be in LA. He could be in Portland.
And so the whole Speed Demon. So for audiences, not necessarily kids, but parents and film lovers, once they saw the Michael Jackson Speed Demon segment, they would be like, oh, that's the guy who created.
California Raisins.
It's very much
I've seen this before. Yeah.
and that's
Is
probably why
he
it took.
more? Is he still with us or?
No, he passed away in 2018. And actually, he kind of then his company Will Vinton was bought out by Leica, which went on to do like Coraline and the Box Trolls and all of those kind of things. So all of that was sort of an evolution down into Leica and those movies.
So when you saw the Speed Demon segment, which you've seen before, not only do you have a special place in your heart for it because of Portland, but also because Jackson really did spare no expense with getting the best of the best of the best of the best do this movie.
Yeah. Yep.
I mean, budget was probably for that segment was probably astronomical.
Well, but probably not because it's all animation. So it's like you just have one little tiny studio. This was probably the cheapest part of this movie to make. I mean, all they had to do is buy a tank of gas and film driving around Portland and speed it up, and then they could just animate the characters over top of that. So I think that probably this was, like I say, the cheapest part of this thing to make. I mean, even the animation for Leave Me Alone probably cost more than this did.
I mean, they were using technology also that would go on to Who Framed Roger Rabbit in this section too. So not to say that it's like, you know, it was like it was bleeding edge technology at the time. So you can't really quantify it in terms of like its budget only because they have no idea like whether or not it's going to work. So, you know.
Well, you have to think too, it's like when you talk about cartoon dancers integrating with, you know, cartoon things that are dancing at the same thing, they did that back in the days of Betty Boop in the 20s and 30s. It's like you would just animate over a schematic of whatever the person was doing. I mean, Gene Kelly and Jerry from Tom and Jerry did a dance, which was adorable and perfectly synced. So, I mean, the ability to do that was there. So it wasn't like that was the cutting edge technology. It was more like, we got to blue screen this in, or we got to, you know, rotoscope this in.
But people would have been familiar with, when they saw the rabbit character, they would have been familiar with, oh, that looks like the California Raisins, or that looks like Noid. Do you know what I mean?
Oh, it's not, looks like it was the Noid. The Noid was in it.
He was literally in there for a second. Yeah.
He's in it?
Yeah, he's in it.
He's in there's a shot where like it's a group of them going after Michael Jackson and the Noid is front and center.
So people would have known who the Noid is at that particular moment then.
Absolutely.
Domino's Pizza?
Domino's Pizza. And the Noid, actually, as a side note, went on to inspire a serial killer. So, and that's why the Noid like went away, is because this guy was like killing people and blaming it on the Noid. So, fun.
Sounds very much like Donnie Darko.
It's kind of freaky. Yeah, it's a little freaky anyway.
But I guess on a side note, when you watch the Speed Demon music video, does it sort of capture what it felt like to be in Portland in the 80s at that time?
It's, you know, I didn't live in Portland in the 80s, but I mean, it makes me now like, oh, everything's so clean and there's so few people. Yeah, because now, of course.
I've never been to Portland.
Well, you come on out, we take care of you.
I'll
take you on the loop where where he's driving.
Speed Demon.
Yep, we could play it on the car. Yeah.
Do y'all have a favorite segment slash song from this movie? I probably know your answers to it, but maybe not. Mine would, of course, be "Smooth Criminal." That's my favorite Michael Jackson song. I can't tell you why, but that's my absolute favorite Michael Jackson song. Um, so I digress. But what is y'all's favorite segment slash song from this movie, and why?
I'm gonna say my favorite segment is Speed Demon, but my favorite song is probably Smooth Criminal.
I'd say same. Actually, I do have I have an appreciation for "Leave Me Alone"
Oh yeah.
now, just because of like the technical aspects of it that we spoke
Mhm.
about. I mean, it won like a Golden Lion Award at Cannes for a reason. But "Smooth Criminal," the music video itself, but even that entire section of the movie, still like it's cribbing on everything that made 1980s Spielberg movies like special. And it's done very much as like a Spielberg homage, even though it's not directed by Spielberg or anyone in Spielberg's like I guess circle. It's actually done. The director was actually Colin Chivillers, who has a Rocky Horror Picture Show connection. He was the visual effects supervisor for Rocky Horror Picture Show. So a little cult movie.
Oh,
Nice.
musical connection.
Yeah.
Yeah, and Rusty Lemarand as well, because he also did Electric Dreams, which
Mhm.
I love.
Oh, Electric Dreams. Is that with Willie Ames? And
No, that's the one with the computer that like the computer's fighting the guy for the love of the girl.
it's not Willie Ames. Is it Scott Baio's?
No, it wasn't anybody. It was Lenny Von Dolan was the guy's name.
What's the movie that they were like in this sort of? I know you're talking about Electric Dreams. They were in another Scott Baio, or one of them were in another movie that was kind of like
That
that movie.
Zapped.
That's it.
is
Or whatever.
nothing like that movie.
Do you have one Michael Jackson song that is really near and dear to you? That if someone quizzed you on it and say, what is your favorite Michael Jackson song? Mine's Smooth Criminal, followed by probably You Are Not Alone. But what are y'all's favorite Michael Jackson songs if you had to guess or had to choose which one that was really important to you?
Probably Thriller, because that was like horror, and that's my bailiwick. And also, I loved the making of Thriller video that came out. I watched that endlessly as a child. So that's probably my favorite.
I want to say
Hmm.
Thriller also. Like, Thriller again was one of those first moments of like knowing what pop music was,
Yeah.
and I remember that music video, the making of, watching it as a kid and having again like, wow, like they made him a werewolf and they made him a
Mhm.
zombie and seeing the makeup and
I'm
all.
still traumatized by the shots of him getting those contact lenses put in.
The full eye. Oh
Just thinking about that, my eyes are literally watering
yeah,
right now.
yeah,
Something happened. Didn't it hurt him or something like that? Didn't they
yeah. I
put
think
some weird
Oh yeah, it's a full scleral,
they
contact
have to numb
lens.
your eyes in order to put it in. It's
Ugh.
glass. It's not plastic. It's glass. Contact lenses that they're putting. That's how it was done back then.
And he could only wear them for like a small amount of time. And
You're
so
blind.
many actors in the 80s that had to do those, like had permanent damage from them.
They
there's
used them.
the
They used them on Lost Boys, and like I think
Yeah,
Ethan Sutherland like was not taking to them properly. Like he had like an allergic reaction or
yeah.
something.
There's like some of them that like they actually had to have them surgically removed after, which is
Oh,
terrifying. Like, yeah, so I mean, I love wearing glasses. I always wanted to wear glasses. If people are like, why did you get contacts? I'm like, no, no, I was traumatized by the making of Michael Jackson's Thriller as a child. I'm sorry, no, I can't put anything on my eyeballs.
was the new HBO Max make a thriller documentary that just came out that's supposed to be really good. I don't have HBO, but it's about the entire making of the album of Thriller and Quincy
Oh,
Jones. All these people talk about how it really the way the trailer made market it was that it's the album that changed history. It's
was
the
that
album,
was
huh?
that by Max or was that done through the estate?
HBO Max, I guess, with the permission of the estate, because they modeled. I mean, Michael Jackson's estate and Instagram advertised it, so it's official.
All right, so it's an official one. Yeah. Wow.
Yeah, it came out this month, so it's about or December. It's about the history behind the Thriller album and what Michael did and how he used instruments that had never been used before, and he used sound effects that had never been used before, and how he pushed himself. Before he began, he's like, I want to make the number one selling album of all time. And so it's worth a watch. I'm gonna have to bootleg it, of course, because we don't have HBO Max over here. But yeah, I'm excited for y'all to see it. So thank y'all so much. And hopefully one day, when we do the Wiz soon, y'all want to talk about the Wiz. I mean, I love the Wiz. So, I mean, if y'all are ever
I'll relive the trauma of the Wiz just for you, James.
fucking terrifying.
Oh no, it is a wild, like it's that
Fever
period
dream
again, like
nightmare.
the 1970s where like musicals could be terrifying. Just fucking
Because it wasn't even supposed, the original Wiz literally was basically the African American version of the Wizard of Oz that took place in Kansas. The director and Motown and Joel Schumacher are the ones that wanted to set it in scary, gritty New York City
that's
with
brilliant.
the trash. Remember the trash cans that came to life in that movie?
The pillars.
Yeah. It's because New York City in the 1970s looked like that.
Yeah,
New York
which
City in the
was the
1970s was
scary
terrifying.
crowd. Yeah, horrifying. Yeah.
Yeah. You did not
It
want to
was,
be.
yeah, I guess that's when New York was not
Yeah.
some.
No, you did
It was
not go.
bankrupt. New York was bankrupt, so like the garbage
Yeah.
was not taken out. Like
And then the
Oh,
blackouts and the Summer of Sam and all the serial killers and just a horrifying time in New York City. What a wonderful thing. I mean, that they keep taking this property that is for children, essentially Wizard of Oz. They make Return to Oz. They make The Wiz. The two just absolutely most terrifying films. Just
okay.
Michael Jackson did say though, like kids like to be frightened.
well,
Yeah.
they do, but not
Why,
like 80s
that's why he pushed.
style.
What's that?
Not like 80s style.
Oh well, no, I mean, but um, with that said though, yeah, like
Talk to
you
my
know,
therapist.
But I think that's
push it a
why
little bit.
my generation and older, we can handle
Oh,
we can handle different things because the movies that I grew up with were marketed towards me. They were very mature. Like I remember being 5 years old and watching The Watcher in the Woods and Return to Oz on Disney Channel.
Mhm.
And I remember watching those movies and they were scary, but I enjoyed being scared.
mhm.
And so that's why everything's so tame these days, where they dumb it down and they think children these days are not mature enough for something. I think that has a reverse effect to where we get shit, where every Disney movie now is shit.
Yep.
And I think that's maybe why, we need a reemergence of the terrifying.
Yep. Focus group.
Yeah,
We
right.
We need
focus group this movie. Yeah.
to scare the shit. In the words of Michael Jackson, kids need to have the shit scared out of them.